A full week into the invasion, Caligulio still believed his elite forces were advancing through the labyrinth. Down below, the truth was much worse for them. Their best soldiers had walked into a battlefield we understood completely. If you're enjoying the story, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe so the next episode finds the right people. Patreon supporters also get early access and help cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering that keep this series moving. Now, back on the surface, Caligulio was still waiting for reports that would never arrive. A full week had passed since the labyrinthine invasion began. One by one, the gate took in the Empire's soldiers, and still it remained silent. Caligulio could only bide his time, seething over the news that never came and the reports that were never delivered. That frustration was his body's way of disguising the fear his instincts were manufacturing for him. Even this late, he had no contact with the troops inside, and on top of that, all contact with the rest of the labyrinth was gone. At first glance, they seemed completely isolated behind enemy lines, and that unnerved him. Caligulio snapped at his staff. "No one's returned yet? Still?" There was no answer to his ranting. In a way, that was the best answer they could give him. Both Caligulio and his staff officers knew the situation was not looking good. On the first day, they had sent soldiers inside in several waves, and those soldiers had brought back intel on the labyrinth. Nobody could get back out, but at first they could at least communicate with the people inside. By compiling what they relayed to him, Caligulio had been able to get a rough idea of their status. Upon entering the labyrinth, soldiers were required to confirm that they wished to remain inside. Once they did, they were presented with the conditions for beating it. Defeat the 10 marvels within and collect the 10 keys in their possession. Doing so will grant you the right to challenge the king of the labyrinth. Defeat the king and you will have beaten the labyrinth. They all thought it would be easy at first. Now they had to admit that it had been a terrible decision. According to the information they gathered, the labyrinth contained at least 50 floors. Troops entering it would be transported to different floors in turns, 1,000 at a time. That allowed new soldiers to eventually contact those who had entered earlier. But those contacts did not begin until over 50,000 soldiers had stormed in. Given the repeated sorties over 3 days, there were probably 54 or so floors down there. The report from Shinji's party, as given by Yuki, stated that the labyrinth contained 60 floors, but it had become clear fairly early on that this intel was shaky at best. After all, the strength of the monsters inside was far different from what they had heard. Shinji's claim that the White King was the boss of the labyrinth destroyed almost any remaining credibility. The White King's floor was discovered on day 2, judging by the reports, and apparently he was only one of the so-called 10 dungeon marvels. Some among Caligulio's staff still feared that the rumors were true, but either way, nobody was smiling now. One officer muttered, "Even for our finest elites, it must be a great challenge." Another answered, "Indeed, sir. If we don't do something, I fear this entire invasion might end in failure." Caligulio shuddered. This was not acceptable to him. Mission failed was easy enough to say, but it translated to the deaths of 530,000 imperial soldiers. Emperor Gadora had entrusted those soldiers to him, and every single one of them was a valued asset. There was no way Caligulio could simply abandon them all. But they were still only 7 days in. They had plenty of time before their scheduled limit. They had to still be fighting inside the labyrinth. All Caligulio could do was trust in that and wait. That should have been the right option. But Caligulio, and really his entire staff, felt as if they were walking a path straight to failure. It was the 10 marvels who made them think that way. At this point, the Imperial soldiers had obtained 4 of the keys mentioned in the rules, specifically from the 4 Dragon Lords, who apparently revived themselves again and again if beaten. As for the remaining 6 marvels, however, nobody on the field had any idea how to even hurt them. That was certainly true for the White King, but even the Death Paladin by his side was a menace. Then there was the Queen of the Insects, the mistress overseeing a pack of magical beasts, and the attacking golem nicknamed the Ghost of Gadora by the troops. They did not even know the identity of the 10th and final marvel. Unless they could defeat those 6, beating the labyrinth was a pipe dream. Both Caligulio and his staff unanimously agreed that it simply was not possible with the fighting force currently inside. Caligulio said, "At this rate, we could put everything the Empire has in there and achieve nothing." An officer agreed. "Indeed, sir." Caligulio continued, that would be a waste of resources. It would also affect our defenses here on the surface. So what were they to do? There was only one answer. They would have to conquer the labyrinth the way it was always supposed to be conquered, with a small team of elites. But if that was their option, the question became who they would pick for the job. After stewing over it for a while, Caligulio decided to gather the best people who remained among the surface forces, a total of 100 men and women. Only those who were truly elite, or at least powerful and ready to prove it, were recruited. Sitting in the front row was an elegant-looking gentleman wearing a neatly starched uniform despite being in a military field camp. His name was Minitz, a high-ranked major general. Caligulio trusted him more than anyone else, making Minitz his pick to command this operation. Next to Minitz was a man smoking a cigarette, looking like he was pondering the sheer futility of life. His fearless gaze, as if staring down his prey, and his well-kept beard instilled awe in anyone who encountered him. Fortunately for him, he had the talent to ensure he never betrayed the expectations of anyone who challenged him. This was Colonel Kanzis, a true champion with countless glorious achievements to his name. Most notable among them was the notorious Operation Mystic Sweep, which he had personally commanded. He always kept a dignified demeanor, perhaps a sign of supreme self-confidence. Even when dealing with superior officers, he never showed a hint of fear. Very few people warned Kanzis about that, and they had no right to. He reported directly to Minitz, and Minitz tolerated his attitude well enough. Caligulio had thoughts about this, but not enough to complain about one of the Empire's most famed heroes. He left Kanzis's handling entirely to Minitz, so if Kanzis went out of line here, there would be no one to stop him. Among the rest of the 100, Lucius and Raymond stood out in particular. They were both otherworlders. Lucius possessed the unique skill Fusionist, letting him set off highly explosive attacks that were the talk of the Imperial Army. Raymond, on the other hand, had the unique skill Combatant. As a former martial artist, this was basically his old job taking skill form. It made him a first-class fighter, mastering any weapon, fighting style, and art he had learned in this world. Those were the 4 most famous names, but the others were walking armies of their own. They all ranked at least an A, and even among the Empire's illustrious ranks, each was a 1 in 10,000 talent. These 100 people alone could destroy the Night Corps of entire nations. Now Caligulio was entrusting the entire operation to this set of champions. Caligulio addressed them. All right, you understand the situation? They all silently nodded. Some, like Kanzis, smirked at the question, but most were earnestly listening to Caligulio's words. Caligulio said, "Our comrades in the labyrinth are currently awaiting relief. In order to leave, we must satisfy all the conditions, and that includes defeating the Demon Lord. My armored division is the strongest in the Empire, and I know they are up to solving this most difficult of tasks. But there is no time to waste." The labyrinth was not the kind of place that could be overrun with human wave tactics. Caligulio understood that now, although he could never honestly say so without torpedoing his army's morale, so he embellished things a bit as he spoke. "You must defeat these so-called 10 marvels and retrieve the 10 keys they possess. That will apparently give you the right to challenge the Demon Lord himself. This is exactly what I expect you to do. The Demon Lord must be taken down." That was the mission he gave to the best the armored division had to offer. Minitz, the highest ranked among the group, answered on the division's behalf. "We accept, Lord Caligulio. The Demon Lord is no enemy of ours, for we are the glorious army of the Empire. Now it is time to prove that to you." With a graceful bow, Minitz promised complete victory for his side, and no one around him had a single discouraging word. These were the brave heroes who would challenge the Demon Lord in his own domain. But they were ignorant, and that ignorance was what kept them hopeful. They were unaware of the dangers the labyrinth held. Now would have been the perfect time to retreat, but it was too late. Caligulio's decision had simply come too late. The battle inside the labyrinth was already over. Nobody was left alive. Not realizing any of that, the chosen heroes marched into the dreadful labyrinth in the highest of spirits. After being enthralled with the big screen for a fairly extended period of time, we finally decided to take a break. I don't know, I guess I saw this coming. The Empire definitely ignored the warning on the gate, and in epic fashion too. In fact, they sent even more soldiers into the labyrinth than we anticipated. I said, amazing. Better than I ever thought it would go.
Indeed. and none of them were strong enough to cause particular concern. The 10 dungeon marvels must truly be that powerful, yes, but perhaps this is going to be easier than I thought.
Even so, Benimaru was not being careless. In fact, his attention was already back on the surface. I said, "Looks like there's some more movement."
Yes. I think they are selecting a group this time rather than relying on sheer numbers. I wish they could have reached that conclusion sooner, though. Then maybe the Labyrinth forces would have had more of a struggle.
Well, hang on, I told him. It has still turned out really good for us, hasn't it?
Yes, true enough. But when things go this well, I suppose I cannot help but feel uneasy.
That was not exactly what I wanted to hear from Benimaru, but based on his attitude, I imagined he saw all this as a foregone conclusion. But I think I saw the problem. He wanted the Empire to try harder so he would have a chance to join the fray, didn't he? I guess I kind of understood that feeling. Or maybe not. No, I mean if I did, I would turn into a battle maniac like all these guys, right? I am not like Benimaru and the rest. I was satisfied with these results. Besides, like I have said tons of times, in this world, quality counts for a lot more than quantity. This specially selected force must have been the enemy's main war power. There was a decent chance they could beat the 10 marvels individually, so now was no time to play around. Our objective was to thin out the enemy forces, and we had certainly succeeded there. The Empire had 100,000 or so troops left, and in terms of size alone, they were now winnowed down to a point where the Western nations could handle them on their own. You know how it is. It is like a gambling table. Your opponent wins big at first, then you take advantage after they lose sight of when to fold. They picture themselves as winners so clearly that even if they lose big later, they get suckered into believing they can make it all back. Even if you know it is a logical fallacy, it can be really hard to stop. That was exactly what happened to the Empire this time. Thanks to continually deploying their forces in there, their army was now well past the point of no return. For us, that was great. Mission accomplished. I was super happy with how well everything had gone so far, but we still had not achieved our secondary mission, finding the most powerful members of the Imperial Army. There were a few decently strong individuals, but nobody who looked like they could take me down. Still, I dunno. The Rimuru who Chloe talked about in her story had not become a demon lord. His strength was probably about where I was when I lost to Hinata. Sorry, tied with Hinata. Either way, I did not detect any real threats here so far. Maybe that guy with the legend-class weapon Testarossa killed? Maybe Davis, that 11th ranked dude, had a shot at doing me in. Again, not the current me, but the me from back when I fought Hinata. In the end, I had to conclude that this threat to my life had not quite shown up yet. There was no point stewing over it, so I put the topic on hold. What I was really curious about right then were the thoughts of the enemy commander. If the situation was this dire for them, I would think he would choose to retreat normally. What could he be thinking? Raphael answered inside my mind.
Understood. Since communication is cut off with the rest of their forces, he likely lacks adequate awareness of the current situation. Presumably, they are clinging to a non-existent hope to bring them victory.
Wow. Way to lay on the sarcasm, Raphael. That sounded legit to me, but in that case, maybe we were winning the information war a little too much. If their commander had a proper grasp of the situation, maybe he would have retreated a lot sooner. Raphael gave me the colder answer.
Negative. If you do not hit an enemy thoroughly when you can, you will leave behind enmity that may come back to haunt you later. There is no need to show mercy to the intruders.
Yikes. Rough. It was brutally rational and ruthless, but it seemed like the right answer too. If we left a sizable enemy force behind, the Empire probably would not give up on its ambitions. But if we kept hitting them hard, we could probably avoid further war, at least for the time being. Maybe it would be best to do everything halfway instead. The enemy had families too, right? Their next of kin were bound to be sad about this. But if we were thorough with making them realize their own stupidity here, maybe that would help deter future wars. Maybe it was not the good guy approach, but in terms of eliminating little flare-ups in the future, it was the right thing to do. Bit late for that now, but still. Regardless, unlike Raphael here, I have kind of an indecisive streak. If the enemy flees, I let them do what they want. If they come back to attack me, I crush them. I am letting the other side take the initiative with decision-making, and maybe that is a little naive of me. It is something I am aware of, but honestly, it is just part of my nature and I do not think it will be fixed too easily. I really do not want them to attack me deep down. The least amount of trouble in my life, the better. As I internally whined about this, Ramiris sent me a thought communication.
Got a moment, Rimuru?
I answered through the link. Sure, this is Rimuru. I'm open. The tone of her voice suggested it was nothing urgent. What could it be?
Right, so, another 100 or so are coming, right?
Looks that way, yeah, I said. Real strong ones this time, too.
So the 10 marvels just sent me a couple of requests?
Ramiris laid them out for me. Request number 1 was proposed by Gadora. Apparently he knew a couple of the people in this elite group, Lucius and Raymond, both otherworlders. He wanted a chance to talk with them and maybe have them defect to our side. Request number 2 was from Kumara. She recognized another familiar face, but unlike with Gadora, this guy was not an acquaintance so much as a target for revenge. This was the very person who had destroyed the mystic village that had been home to Kumara and her friends, then sold the young Kumara to Clayman. She was already nearly 300 years old by that point, but still, I had no idea some bastard that vicious was working for the Empire. Eesh. So those were the 2 requests. Now what to do about them? I asked Benimaru aloud. What do you think, Benimaru?
Well, the human wave approach is a good shortcut to victory, but it is not exactly pretty. I realize there is no such thing as a pretty or an ugly war, but I think we are safe in granting Gadora's wish. If he gets them to join us, then great. If not, it will not hurt us very much.
Seem legit to me. It would help us spread the enemy around. Besides, I would let Gadora reach out to that pair then. As for Kumara,
no one seeking vengeance wants to be stopped in their quest.
Benimaru putting it that way sure made it sound heavy. And come to think of it, had Kumara not been under the thrall of Clayman's demon dominate skill? If the man who brought her to that fiend was back here in the labyrinth, it was only natural that she would be out for revenge. They say nothing fruitful actually comes from revenge, but personally, I think it can bring closure. If you have a lot of mixed up feelings, it is better to let them all out and free yourself, isn't it? Through thought communication, I told Ramiris, okay, Ramiris, you got my approval on both.
Oh, great! Thanks so much, Rimuru! You're so understanding!
I continued. We'd like to get the enemy spread out anyway, so why don't we do this? You can send Lucius and Raymond over to Gadora, and Kumara can have that,
the bearded dude. We don't know his name, but he sure has a nasty face, doesn't he?
Something told me Ramiris was really favoring Kumara here, but I was with her on that. Yeah, I told her. Send him over to her, and tell her I said good luck.
Okay, I'm on it!
So I accepted the requests. Now, where should we send the rest of the Empire's elites?
I think that man over there is the commander. I would suggest we give him to Apito to execute Sir Rimuru. Alone.
Benimaru could really stand to phrase things a little more lightly. Was he not just talking about fighting pretty and ugly and stuff? I was amazed he was so eager to aim for a murderous strategy like that. But, yeah, I would accept it. I told Ramiris through the link. Also, Ramiris, that well-dressed middle-aged dude over there is the commander, I think, so can you send him alone over to Apito?
Him, huh? Taking away the commander so the whole team loses cohesion, eh? Great idea, Rimuru! I tell ya, you come up with the dirtiest tactics.
Pardon? Why was I the bad guy now? And here Ramiris, completely ignoring my surprise, was remarking about how devious I was. I moved on. And as for the other 100-ish, you wanna just let them at Edelman?
Roger that! My Dragon Lords all lost, but everyone else put in a real big effort. Let's have them keep up the good work right to the end.
She seemed a little peeved about it, but I could not help her much with that. The Dragon Lords just did not quite have what it took to deal with a rushing army. Unlike with the other dungeon marvels, they resided in large arenas with lots of floor-type debuffs. That was great for hassling small parties. But if you had an army that could share information and take countermeasures, it killed the advantage in no time flat. Considering those circumstances, I still thought they fought pretty well. We may have had 4 keys taken, but the remaining 6 marvels remained unbeaten. Hopefully, we would see them keep that up. I warned Ramiris. Sounds great, But whatever you guys do, don't let your guards down. There's a chance they have some really dangerous folks in there.
Oh, we'll be fine. Besides, everyone's itching to go hard now that they know you're watching. And we've always got Master Veldora as King of the Labyrinth, right?
Good point. The idea here was to collect 10 keys and beat the King of the Labyrinth after all. I found it hard to imagine Veldora taking a dive, so at least we could always rely on him. Right, I said. Okay, best of luck out there.
You got it, boss! See ya!
With that excited farewell, Ramiris shut off the thought communication. Just a little bit more effort now, I supposed, and we would be done. I turned my eyes back toward the big screen again, excited to watch the final battle. Lucius and Raymond sat down on the stairway, breathing hard as they drank some water. The reports indicated that there were never monsters on the stairs. It would be dangerous to take that for granted, but it seemed safer than anywhere else, so they chose it for a resting spot. For a while, neither of them said a word. They only caught their breath and let the silence stretch. Being summoned by Commander Caligulio in order to enter the labyrinth had elicited no complaints from them. Just like Shinji and his band, Lucius and Raymond were otherworlders picked up by Master Gadora. Back when they did not know right from left in this world, Gadora had kept them fed and protected, and they owed him a debt of gratitude for that. But now Gadora was missing. He had led a special team on a mission to the territory of the demon lord Rimuru. He had come back once, although none of the other team members did, and he told Yuki they had been killed in battle. Then, not long afterward, Gadora himself vanished. There were a couple of plausible rumors going around that Gadora had ventured back out to rescue his teammates. Those who knew Gadora's personality found that a little far-fetched, but if it was true, they could not ignore it. Besides, the people who joined Gadora, the ones said to have died in battle, were all very well known to Lucius and Raymond. They were Shinji Tanemura, Marc Loren, and Zhen Liuxing, and they had all become good friends after traveling to this world. Their deaths were hard to swallow, but the fact was that they had not been seen in the Empire since. They had been sent to investigate the labyrinth, and Lucius was sure something had happened between them and the demon lord Rimuru. It was reasonable to think they had tried taking him on, then died in the effort. Some of the other worlders like Lucius were sad to see Shinji and his friends gone. Lucius and Raymond were no exception, and many others expressed their sorrow as well. Being from the same place had a way of instilling that sort of solidarity. Besides, Shinji was something of a leader type, a kind young man who never abandoned those in need. He could be a bit insensitive, but a lot of people looked up to him. Lucius and Raymond both owed Gadora. They also wanted to find out if 3 close friends of theirs were safe. So after some discussion among their peers, it was decided that the 2 of them having the most combat power out of their group would go undercover on this campaign. They immediately proposed the idea to Yuki, who promptly rejected it.
It's really dangerous to act right now. All kinds of things are getting jumbled together, so I'd keep laying low if I were you. I can't go into details, sadly, but I'm sure Shinji and his friends are fine, so...
If Yuki called it dangerous, it must really have been dangerous. But not everyone was willing to accept that. If their fates remained uncertain, some Empire otherworlder was bound to take matters into their own hands and take off for the Forest of Jura solo. And if it was going to come to that, they all figured they might as well send the combat specialist of the gang first, so they could deal better with whatever came along. Lucius was originally going to act on his own, but Raymond wound up joining him. They both secured transfers from the composite division to the armored division to join this operation, and neither of them told Yuki about it. With those motivations in mind, both Lucius and Raymond were waiting for Caligulio to give them the order sooner or later, and yet... Again, they rested in silence for a moment, catching their breath on the stairway. Raymond was the first to break it. You know, I'm starting to think going in was a big mistake, Lucius answered. Yeah, maybe. I didn't think the opposition would be this strong. They had both been dropped into floor 59. They were originally going to be tossed right into floor 60. Not that they were aware of that, but there was a chance this duo was hiding their true abilities, or that they were someone else entirely disguised as these 2. So the Labyrinth side wanted to test them first. This was the strategy proposed by Rimuru, or by Raphael really, and Ramiris accepted it, although she remarked about how oddly wary a move it was. So the pair were exposed to intense combat all across floor 59. There was a litany of variable lasers, sonic cannons, and other science-driven weapons. isolation doors came crashing down, locking them into rooms pumped with tasteless, odorless poison gas. All these weapons, crafted in the lab on floor 95, currently floor 100, had been implemented on floor 59, and the icing on the cake was the attack golems. These were based on materials Rimuru retrieved from the puppet nation of Distav, as discovered in the ruins of Amrita. After extensive research, the ruins' defense systems had been recreated, and all of them were being put into thorough use here. Weapons that did not even need to be turned on at 10% to wipe out Imperial soldiers were now being used to test Lucius and Raymond. It was an offensive like none before, and the two of them had to expose all their deepest inner skills to survive. Raymond kept point, buying enough time for Lucius to unleash his killer blows. Lucius's fusionist skill did what it sounded like. It could mix materials and extract energy from them. When used right, it could unleash attacks akin to nuclear magic. Gadora had discovered that skill and taught him how to harness it, so that old debt of gratitude was still on Lucius's mind as he fought. The battle itself luckily ended in an overwhelming victory for them both. Despite all the destructive force they faced, neither the golems nor all the advanced techie weapons could finish them off. The sheer numbers, though, were absolutely off the charts. Breaking through all those traps was a huge challenge for just two people, and Lucius could not be blamed for being so exhausted after a single day of work. Raymond asked, "Hey, so what now? Wanna go on?" Lucius shot back, "You kidding me? We've only made it down one flight of stairs. We need a plan for this, or else it will be way too dangerous to take on that onslaught again." Raymond knew that, but said it anyway. "Yeah. But we ain't got no other choice, do we? The moment we walked in, we got separated from the group, so..." Raymond was right, and Lucius knew it. But there was nothing they could do. Proceeding onward would be dangerous, yes. But was there any better option available? Going up instead of down certainly did not guarantee they would ever escape the labyrinth. Besides, if that question when they came in was to be believed, it was impossible to leave anyway until they beat the thing. Lucius muttered, "It's totally impossible to beat this labyrinth." Raymond agreed. "Yeah. Maybe if we had more time, but even if we did one floor a day, it would still take at least a month. And if we take that long, we're definitely gonna run out of food." That was the main problem. Lucius and Raymond had not undergone imperial augmentation surgery, so they needed to eat regularly. Water they could manage themselves, but they had just 2 days of food on them. If they kept running into floors with no monsters like before, they could not rely on monster meat to supplement their diet either. At this rate, lasting even 3 weeks was out of the question. It was just 1 day after they went in, and already things were starting to look hopelessly bleak. But they were not giving up. They had come here because they wanted to find out about their mentor and friends. If they were going to give up and run at this point, they never would have volunteered in the first place. Lucius pointed at his neck and asked Raymond, "Hey, you think they can trust these things they gave us before we went in?" This item was something Caligulio had given them before the operation, a prototype made at the Imperial Research and Development Labs. It was a replica of the revival item Gadora had brought back. The commander told him that if he died in the labyrinth, the thing would resurrect him, although Lucius did not believe it. Raymond said, skeptical, "How can I trust him on that? And even if it does work, where's it going to revive me?" Lucius said, "Yeah, because if you wake up on the spot, it is going to be right next to the monster that just killed you. They didn't test that part out yet, did they?" Raymond answered, "Nah, they want us to instead. But why a necklace though? Didn't he bring back a bracelet?" Lucius said, "Guess it shows how far the Empire's lagging on that tech." This was in essence a knockoff made on a rushed timetable, so it wound up a little larger than the original. That was the explanation given to Lucius anyway. It only added to the sheer distrust. Who would ever want to put their life in the hands of a shoddy imitation? Caligulio had framed it as a special honor. "This, you see, I can only give to the truly special ones. And I firmly believe that you two are worthy enough to be entrusted with this." Sure, he had called it something special, but turn it around and he was basically admitting they had no idea if it worked. They did not make any for the rank-and-file soldiers, so it was up to Lucius and Raymond to see what would happen. Maybe they could trust it more if the Empire had some experimental data or something. But being involuntary test subjects like this was ridiculous. Lucius said, "Well, at least I'll find out what happens when you die first." Raymond, ever the realist, recoiled. Oh man, don't even joke about that. No way I'm gonna rely on this anyway. Besides, don't the resurrection bracelets this is based on run on the power of the demon lord Ramiris? If we try using a fake based on something we basically shoplifted from her, isn't that gonna piss her off? Lucius shrugged his agreement, his thoughts largely the same. To them, the conclusion was obvious. They had to act as if resurrection was not at all possible. All they could rely on were their own strengths, so they stood up, sarcastic smirks on their faces. Lucius asked, "You ready?" Raymond answered, "Yeah, if we're here and all, might as well go all the way. If it doesn't work out, at least we'll be forgiven for it." Lucius asked, "You think, like maybe Shinji would just laugh it off, but her, you know?" Raymond groaned. "Don't even start. I just managed to forget about her too," Lucius said. Sorry. I'm more scared of her than I am of this labyrinth," Raymond warned him. "Whoa, don't spill your guts just because she ain't here, man. You're right and all, but," Lucius said. "Right? I can't believe how insensitive Shinji can be. All that enthusiasm pointed his way and it goes right over his head." Raymond answered, "Totally. But that's Shinji for you. And her too, like," Lucius softened. "Yeah, he's a good guy. Maybe he survived all this even," Raymond said. "Yeah, he had to." They both smiled. Even in these dire straits, they still held hope in their hearts, and they knew the path they had to take. So, still smiling brightly, they started down the stairs, not even knowing what awaited them. And then, Shinji called out, startled but alive. "Hello there, Lucius. And Raymond, too. Listen, there's something I'd like to discuss with you," Marc added. "Yeah, something really good, you know? So hear him out." Zhen quietly followed. Yes, give him a chance. Encountering Shinji, Marc, and Zhen, the targets of their rescue operation, immediately past the stairs made Lucius and Raymond freeze on the spot. A familiar voice boomed out from the gigantic golem looming before them. It seems they might be a tad shocked. Well, allow me to ask you as well. Will you listen to what I have to say? It was undoubtedly Gadora, the one Lucius and Raymond owed their lives to. Lucius could barely get the question out. Are you alive?" Raymond followed, just as stunned. "And, can you explain this, man?" And so the battle of persuasion between the two sides began. It would take just a little more time before the two thoroughly confused would-be heroes saw things Gadora's way. All told, the job went surprisingly easily and surprisingly successfully, too. Even Shinji's gang, who had announced previously that they would not join the war, volunteered for this particular mission. Thanks to them, the two sides reached an agreement with hardly any trouble. Lucius and Raymond were apprentices of Gadora and friends to Shinji's gang, but after that workout up on floor 59, Lucius was the clear standout. His skill was just off the charts. All it took was a little tap on something in his hand, and it would trigger a small explosion in front of him, one with nuclear-level force but limited to a tiny range. The smallest motions seemed to let him produce the most amazing results. The unique skill fusionist let him transform matter itself, fusing it with other matter in the process. This let him, for example, throw a pebble at an enemy and cause the foe to blow up on impact. Even if a barrier warded off the pebble, it would still explode the moment it hit the ground. It would be neat if he could ricochet shots for situations like that, but since the pebbles Lucius preferred were small enough to flick with a single finger, that was a lot to ask of him. Besides, having a pebble ignite on this target and not that one was also tough to manage. Still, this was one evil skill. If he got the timing wrong, Lucius could easily end up burned, but he had thoroughly researched it. Exactly what kind of research nobody besides him knew, but he certainly seemed to have perfected his craft. Raymond, as his partner, demonstrated superb combat skills. His shield, meant to symbolize his own fighting spirit, was just as impressive. The way he used it to block all frontal attacks was a sight to behold. It even deflected the shockwaves from Lucius's explosions without complaint. As a team, they meshed really well. So these were the real things, no disguises or whatever. They were not under any sort of mind control, and it seemed they really were here to find out what happened to Gadora and Shinji's gang. They both seemed pretty trustworthy, and honestly, I was glad they were on our side. Now that they were on board, I would have them work under Shinji's group for a while as a kind of training period. I did not think we needed to worry about them betraying us, but it was just a precautionary measure. Once I saw how they did, I could upgrade them to the same status as Shinji and the others.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.